Hi, this is Jeff Owens from classichorrors.club.
And I'm Richard Chamberlain from monstermoviekid.wordpress.com.
Welcome to this special Halloween video. We are here on site in one of the most iconic scenes of any horror film, Psycho. I am deep inside the house, and Richard, you're out front. Why have we gathered to make this special Halloween video?
Well, I think I see you in the window. If I can get my finger right there. There's Jeff. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Rich, I see you.
Well, it's the Halloween season, right? And we are here to talk Halloween movies. I kind of an idea, just to do a special little video to talk about well, initially it was to talk about our go-tos, our annual holiday viewings. We're gonna kind of play with that idea a little bit because I have for a long time now, had certain films that I always go to, over the holiday season, and they kind of fluctuate. This is kind of what my current top five is. And it's not a number one, number two, number three. It's just five films, five things that are like my go-tos at the moment. Your criteria is a little different, and I think that's going to be, kind of the fun part of the conversation. But as you and I talked about before the camera started rolling, I wouldn't be surprised if we have maybe some bleed over. We really don't know, folks,
No?
what we have done. There's been no conversation whatsoever about what's in our list. What's your criteria?
I don't have the tradition you do, and you do it on most of the holidays, or at least I know Christmas as well as Halloween. You have your annual perennials those opposites. Every year you watch the same movies. I don't really do that. The thing about being a monster kid is you watch these movies year round. I have picked 5 movies that I am going to watch this year, perhaps to start a tradition. But these are 5 movies that are, I think, in general, go-to movies. They're not deep dives. They're just good, solid films. These are ones that are very entertaining to me. I could watch over and over again. And often when I reach the end, I'm like, I want to watch it again right now. My other criteria is that during Halloween, you get people who aren't monster kids that want to watch horror movies. With the possible exception of one, these are all good, solid movies that anyone could watch. Get a little bit of a Halloween thrill, not too much, not too much gore, but these are movies I would say this is why I'm a horror fan. You should watch this movie. Hopefully I start a tradition because I really appreciate the fact that you do that.
I think it'll be a fun conversation during the Halloween time. We've been doing our countdown to Halloween all month and talking about a lot of other fun films. And this is just, yeah, two guys talking about Halloween movies and the Halloween season. And I think it'll be fun.
Yeah. So I'll start her off. And again, like Richard said, this isn't a ranking. This is just 5 movies. Because of my compulsion to assign some order to things, I am going to go chronologically, but this does not indicate any favor one way or the other for these movies. My first one, and this is the one that I think might be a duplicate, is from 1948, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Not a duplicate.
Oh, okay. Then I
Yeah.
think we're going to have 10 original movies then.
Awesome.
This is the perfect gateway film for someone coming into horror. These characters are iconic. They're ubiquitous. Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, Larry Talbot, the Wolfman. Even if you've never seen a monster movie, people have an awareness of who these characters are. So you don't need any knowledge before watching this, even though it is part of a series. What I love about the very concept of this movie is that although it's played for laughs, it fits in to the continuity of the series, as much as you can call the Universal monster movies having continuity, which I do think they do to a certain extent. It's just so much fun to watch.
It's an awesome movie to start things off. Absolutely. And I do love Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And it's the best of their meat movies. It revived their career. Their films were on the way out. And that was a perfect film that wrapped up the Universal horror Frankenstein series and brought Bela Lugosi back as Dracula. I'm going to go a little farther back, but I'm going to go Universal horror, and I'm going with Frankenstein, 1931. Between Frankenstein and Dracula, and I can't remember which one, But I saw these roughly mid 70s. So I was probably about, 8 years old, give or take. That really prime age, I think, for some people might have even watched them earlier than that. But back then, you watched what was on television. And it was the first time that these had been on TV. They made a big deal about the local station. I loved it. The monster, of course, Karloff is amazing in it. The sympathy that you get for the monster in this film, more so, I think, than any other. I mean, even with Bride of Frankenstein, which some would argue is a better film, there's something about this first one. He's a beast, but just the way that he's treated and the scene with the girl by the lake, the overall feel of this and the look, it's like a warm blanket. It just makes me feel cozy. And of course, I almost always follow up. Then I have to watch Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, and all the others. And every year, though, this gets plugged in, and I watch the Universal documentary from what 98, 99. I think the childhood nostalgia thing is really what got me started on it, and I think that this will represent Universal horror because I've always thrown in others, Dracula, Mummy, what have you. I may not see them all every year, but I got to see at least some. And Frankenstein is almost always in the pack.
If I were to have picked one Universal monster other than Abbott and Costello, this is the one I would pick for all the reasons you said. I really enjoy this one. Well, it should come as no surprise to you, Richard, that I am going to zip ahead 30 years and get into my sweet spot of the 70s. And my first one, not for the reasons you think, is from 1970, House of Dark Shadows. Now, it's not just because I love the classic soap opera ABC television series that, well, maybe just a little, but this is just a terrific 1970s vampire film. Jonathan Frid plays Barnabas Collins, a truly, truly brutal and scary vampire in this movie. The threat feels very real as he picks off the characters one by one. This has a lot of story crammed into a little time, but it just moves so fast. You don't have to know the series. This is really a retelling of his origin and his story with a much darker turn than was in the television series. Some nostalgia on this one. I told the story many times about how I first saw it in the Chief Theater in Indian, Oklahoma, but it's just terrific. It's one of my favorite vampire movies.
That's an awesome choice, and I think my experience with Dark Shadows is different. I don't have the connection as we've talked about before, but I did really enjoy this movie. It's a movie I want to go back to because I think when I first watched it, I was kind of saturated with Dark Shadows. It's really hard to try to get a sampling of the Dark Shadows
Yes.
television series and come away with any true feeling.
These are movies I would show other people. So yeah, you can't really show somebody a whole storyline from a soap opera, but this is just a good representation. And if they ask, why do you like Dark Shadows? This is it.
Yeah, I would agree.
And see how the vampires do it. House of Dark Shadows. Nobody lives there.
I'm going to skip ahead, but not quite as far, 1957. And I'm going to go south of the border. And I'm picking a Mexican horror film that has not necessarily been my go to for a very long time. And that is El Vampiro with Abel Salazar. This one I had become aware of, I want to say, I guess, hard to believe, about 20 years ago, give or take. But I never got a chance to visit it until I acquired a copy. I think it was at our very first Monster Bash. I think it was in 2017. It's directed by Fernando Mendez, who did Black Pit of Dr. M, The Living Coffin. The atmosphere in this one, it really feels like you're watching a 1930s or early 40s Universal horror film with the use of lights and shadows and just the overall feel. And it's a kind of a familiar vampire tale, certainly a bit more like Hammer in the sense you've got the virginal female lead, the male hero, and then you've got the vampire who is trying to get to the woman. Absolutely fun flick. If you've never watched Mexican horror films, you got to watch the originals with the English subtitles. Don't watch the K. Gordon Murray versions because those come across as a little too cartoonish because the dubbing in those is horrible. Watch the original. watch a good copy of it. I think that you'll absolutely enjoy it. Definitely a film I enjoy.
I have seen it. I don't have that strong a memory of it, but you've sold me. I would like to watch that again very soon. My next movie, if you think of Halloween, costumes, a little bit of fun sprinkled in, maybe in some circles, a little bit of camp, well, then you would have to watch The Abominable Dr. Phibes from 1971. Number one, my favorite horror actor, Vincent Price. Number two, this movie is so simple in its plot. You can say in one sentence, and that is Dr. Anton Phibes seeks revenge on 9 doctors he considers responsible for his wife's death. That's it. That tells you exactly what happens. But the story and the structure built on top of that is just so clever and so entertaining. This is probably my riskiest one because I do know people that it's just not their thing. But I think it's perfect, and I would not be afraid to show it to somebody, even if I thought maybe it wouldn't be their cup of tea.
I listed it as a runner-up
Oh,
because,
really?
well, here's the thing. I wanted to include a Vincent Price film because Vincent Price is a go-to for me for the Halloween season. As we've talked about before on the podcast, I did not care for The Abominable Dr. Phibes when I first saw it. I think I really preferred younger Vincent Price and maybe a bit more of the gothic settings. But I gave it a rewatch, and then I really started looking at them with kind of a different lens, and I was like, these really are a lot of fun. And these are annual viewings, absolutely.
Are you ready for Dr. Five?
Probably the most terrifying motion picture you'll ever see.
I did choose another Vincent Price film, and I would have chosen The Raven as well. The Raven definitely would have been in this top 5, but because we just talked about it on the podcast, I said I'm going to choose a different Vincent Price film. It's another go-to, and that's House on Haunted Hill from 1959. Price is just so amazing in this film. I mean, this is a public domain film, and the print has always looked so good. But Vincent Price is just being what he does best at this time period. He's just being charming with a little hint of evil. Yeah, he's kind of the bad guy in a way, but he's kind of good. It's an old dark house movie kind of feel, and things go bump in the night. I think it's just a lot of fun. And I think I have a connection with this one because I remember watching this at some point, possibly maybe in the 80s. I got a real connection to it when my kids, for whatever reason, they were exposed to this. And this is a black and white movie. And for whatever reason, they loved it. And they watched it time and time and time again. It was a short window of time that they enjoyed it. Then they moved on to something else. But during that time period, I'm like, my kids are watching Vincent Price. I've done something right. I've always had a connection with it, really strong ever since. And it's an annual viewing. You got to watch Vincent Price during the Halloween season, and everything about House on Haunted Hill in my mind is perfect. It's such a fun film, not super dark. It's lighthearted, so it's very accessible for anybody who wants to enjoy some Vincent Price and just enjoy a fun film for the Halloween season.
That's an excellent choice, and it didn't make my list, but I would say it's a strong runner-up. In fact, last year I got to spend Halloween with my daughter for the first time in several years, and we were just stayed home and watched a couple movies, and we watched something newer, and then I was like, okay, what's one movie that I could watch with her that she'd enjoy, but it would represent classic horror and everything I like.
Yeah.
And we watched House on Haunted Hill. It's a great pick.
Nice.
My next pick is from 1972, Horror Express.
Wow.
This is a movie.
You're surprising me on that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a movie I didn't like at first, and each time I watch it, I like it better and better. And the last time I saw it, I realized this really is a perfect movie to show, again, to show somebody who's not really into horror why I like horror and why I think you might. First of all, it's Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing. It shows its cards early. It's a flat out monster movie. They're transporting a monster on a train, but it has so many twists and turns, and it changes, and before long it really becomes something you don't expect. It's a little bit like The Thing, because you don't know who this monster is sort of possessing. It's a mystery, it's thrilling, it's fast moving, and it all is happening on a speeding train. It's just terrific. It's one that snuck up on me and is now a favorite go-to for me.
I do love this movie. You've got Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee and Telly Savalas.
Well,
I mean, not an annual viewing for me, but every time I watch that, I enjoyed it. I'm going to stir things up a little bit. And my last two, going chronological, happen to be from the same year, 1966. And these were probably not going to be considered straightforward horror. One definitely isn't. But I have a strong connection with both of these. I think other people will as well. It's The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. So, I know. So this is not a horror film, but if anyone our age, they grew up with the Charlie Brown specials on television. Late 60s, 1970s, back before we could have videotapes and streaming and stuff. These things would pop up once a year. You had to be in front of your TV Tuesday night at 7:30, or you wouldn't see this again for another year. What makes this so special, I think, the voice cast that they had at this time and the music of Vince Guaraldi is amazing. There's a reason that these soundtracks come out every year. The go-to when I was a kid, and I continued to watch it. Period of time in the 80s, I was too cool for this stuff, and then I wisened up. By the end of the 1980s, I was embracing the stuff that I really loved again. I love everything about it. I gravitate towards these specials every year, and it just makes me feel good. And you feel sorry for Charlie Brown every year when he keeps getting the rock, but it also makes you laugh a little bit. I honestly don't think that there's been a Halloween where I have skipped this in the last 33 years, I think, since I would have first recorded it off television. It's been part of my annual Halloween and will be again. I always save it for Halloween. It's almost always on Halloween night. Before I dive into horror movies, I plug in this special and watch it. And that's going to be the plan this Halloween as well.
Perfect. No raised eyebrows or questions here. That's excellent. Richard, I'm a hypocrite because I told you these were all like fairly innocent, good movies to introduce people to. I got to have one that is just, I probably wouldn't show it to everyone. I would show it to a hardcore fan who has not seen it, but this is one I watched recently to write about for our countdown, spoiler alert. And it's another that every time I watch it, I inflate my rating on it. This is 1981's The Evil Dead.
Wow. Okay.
This is, to me, a perfect horror movie. The kinetic filmmaking of Sam Raimi, the way that camera races across the water through the woods towards this isolated cabin in the woods. It's so fast, it's so furious. It really is a movie that lives up to the hype. And the two hypes I'm talking about, number one, it actually has a subtitle in the end credits at least. It's called The Evil Dead, The Ultimate Experience in Grueling Horror. Absolutely true. And then Stephen King's famous review of it, where he called it ferociously original horror film of the year. Again, I absolutely agree with that 100%. This is fast moving, it's terrifying, it's scary, it's raw. I mean, this was made on a very low budget, and what they accomplish is just amazing. To me, this is the only movie that exists in the franchise. Evil Dead 2 is a glossy remake of it, really. Used to like that better because it was prettier, it was more technically polished. No, go to the original. And then Army of Darkness, what is that? I refuse to believe it exists. But there you have it. Evil, definitely, I think without much convincing at all, a Halloween go-to.
It's been a long time since I've seen The Evil Dead. I really do need to revisit. My final film has been a go-to for a long time. And again, it's not straightforward horror, but I know that everyone loves this movie, The Ghost of Mr. Chicken from 1966. Really, the last 20 years, give or take, it's been an annual viewing for me. I've always loved it, but it really kind of got into that. I have to watch this every year. Once I got a really good copy on DVD, I loved it even more because it was just so good. The old dark house, creepy haunted house. Don Knotts is hilarious in it. Joan Staley, who plays his girlfriend, she was just so lovely in this movie. The music of Vic Mizzy elevates this whole thing. It's fun. If you love the comedy of Don Knotts, he's Barney Fife in this. He really is. I don't know how you could not love this film. Everything about it just makes me smile and takes me back to that. I think of that time in the 70s when, like, I wanted to see it and it just wasn't popping up on TV. Now I can plug it in and watch it 365 days a year if I wanted to. Definitely very, very high on my list. If I had a number one, this would be a serious contender.
If you missed this movie.
Couple things I just want to add is that these are 5 movies. I have way more than 5. And if we were filming this tomorrow, it might be 5 different ones.
I might say Dracula, Universal Dracula might be a go-to, and El Vampiro might not be in the list. So yeah, I agree. As with any list, it can fluctuate. Let us know what your go-tos are. If you get the timing right, we'll throw it in our November episode and share with everyone what their favorites were of the Halloween season.
We'd love to hear what yours are and what your thoughts are on our list. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Classic Horrors Club, and going to both of our blogs, classichorrors.club.
monstermoviekid.wordpress.com.
Most of all, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Happy, happy Halloween, 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 happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock, happy, happy